Thank you, JP, for this warm-up to the state of Bihar. On behalf of the Center for Policy Research, I, Namita Wahi, am very pleased to welcome you all to this panel discussion on the Bihar elections. And I want to thank our panelists for today, Nilanjan Sarkar, Bhanu Joshi, both of whom are colleagues at CPR, and Ghanshyam Tiwari, spokesperson for the JDU. GT's already introduced himself, so let me go ahead and introduce Nilanjan and Bhanu. Nilanjan holds a PhD in political science from Columbia University and a BA in applied mathematics and economics from UC Berkeley. His research interests include voting behavior in India, as well as statistical methods for analyzing political data. Along with Bhanu, who is a research associate at CPR, Nilanjan wrote a series of articles in The Hindu and longer analysis of the Bihar elections while conducting qualitative field research in Bihar. If you haven't read these insightful pieces of writing already, I would encourage you to do so. They are on The Hindu, and the longer analysis, I believe, is on the CPR website. Bhanu's current research focuses on governance issues, particularly around politics and institutions of urban areas. His work has also looked at laws governing urban areas and their interaction with the 74th Constitutional Amendment. He's very interested in understanding electoral politics in India, and the recently concluded Bihar elections were the first sort of foray into this field. So, welcome to all of you, to this discussion. I mean, what I know about a lot of what I know about elections are based on conversations with the panelists here, but we all know that elections in India are notoriously difficult to predict, and polls more often than not get them wrong, and especially when they are spread out over a period of over a month and involve such complex political configurations, like in the case of Bihar, it becomes even more difficult. And I think this election was remarkable also because, surprisingly, not only were the exit polls off, but also the English TV channels got the results completely wrong in the first few hours. So this election saw some unexpected partnerships between, the ruling alliance, which was the Mahagathbandhan, a very bitter contest and vituperative speeches between two very charismatic figures. The Prime Minister on the one hand, who won a massive mandate only last year in an era of coalition politics over the last 20 odd years. This was a very significant achievement. And on the other hand, we have a chief minister who has ruled Bihar for the past decade and has also captured the national public imagination in a significant way. So what worked in Bihar really is the question that I have for all the panelists. And, was it, the simple sort of categories within which the discourse has really proceeded. Was it caste? Was it development? Is it charisma? Was it a referendum on the performances of the national and state governments? And or was it just the victory of a better organized campaign, and what goes in to organize a campaign in a way as to win an election? So these are some of the questions that I hope you will reflect upon today. And, I think that having Ghanshyam talk about these issues today, not just because he has been, a spokesperson for one of the parties in the ruling alliance and has been very actively involved in electoral politics in that way, but also because he's very passionate about driving social change through public leadership and has been involved in the grassroots, public mobilization, as well as various initiatives in education, skill development, and culture, as he showcased through this movie. So, and I think during the television coverage of the election, GT's sort of predicted number for the number of seats that would come out which was actually consistent both before the election and also throughout TV, was probably closest to the actual numbers. So, and interestingly, this was also the conclusion that Nilanjan had more or less reached, the day before the election or so. So I think it'll be very interesting to hear from them how they came up with their findings. So without further ado, I will now turn over the floor to Nilanjan.
It's stuck. Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Namita, and thank you all for coming. So, I've actually just recently joined CPR. I was born, raised, did all of my studies in the US. I joined CPR on August 18th. And actually my birthday is on September 23rd, and on that day I flew into Patna. Couple of hours later, I got on an overnight train to Sultanganj. And so my first birthday ever in India actually was spent on a train to Sultanganj in Bihar, yeah. And when I got to Sultanganj is a pilgrimage town. One of the things that became very apparent in the last week of September is that there was a lot of momentum, a lot of hawa for the BJP, for the NDA. I think most people on the ground at that time, most of the people talking in the media, many of the pollsters, actually had the BJP ahead. And I could see why. When we look back at the data and we break down by assembly segments, the 2014 election in which, the national election in which Narendra Modi was made Prime Minister, out of the 243 assembly segments in Bihar, 172 were won by the NDA. Just 18 months later, at the conclusion of this election, that number had dropped to 58 assembly constituencies. So the real question that we're sort of all going to have to answer is, how do you lose that many seats in 18 months, right? I mean, this is really almost, it's not an unprecedented loss, but it's a lot of loss in a very short period of time. And a lot of things happened between 2014 and 2015, and I think at various points we'll all talk about the mechanics of this. But perhaps the most important thing, which Namita alluded to, is that once bitter enemies, and who had been the two major political leaders in Bihar up until fairly recently, Lalu Prasad Yadav and Nitish Kumar, who were bitter foes actually, decided to band together to try to defeat the BJP and the NDA. And we also sort of need to try to understand what impact that had in what we saw in the final result. So before I get into an analysis of Bihar and what happened during the campaign, let me tell you a little bit about my perspective. So as you can tell from my background, I'm as Bahari as it gets. This is, I haven't spent a lot of time in Bihar. I am not a Bihari. So it's kind of odd that I'm always being asked to talk about Bihar now. But it's because I spent a lot of time there, and I think Bihar gives us a window into larger questions of political behavior and voting behavior in India. Now, from an academic standpoint, it's actually studying voting behavior is a very lonely discipline because it used to be a very vibrant field in India. Anthropologists like M.N. Srinivas, F.G. Bailey from the West, Myron Weiner is a political scientist, Rajni Kothari, they're all very well-known political scientists who work on voting behavior. That essentially died with the emergency. And the field of voting behavior has never really picked up. CSDS, Yogendra, they do a lot of election analyses, but the academic discipline of voting behavior has never really picked up in India. And the reason why it's really sad is that India has gone through a huge change since when these studies were done. I mean, we think about an economic liberalization that took place in the 90s. But in fact, this is also a period of political liberalization. It's when the ECI essentially took control of the elections, and we genuinely have much freer, much fairer elections today than we once had in India. It also coincides with a period of a breakdown of caste domination in politics, right? And so that is really the canvas over which we should sort of understand where Bihar comes into play. So I'm going to start very quickly with 1990. I'm just going to go over what sort of happened since 1990. 1990 is the year that Lalu Prasad Yadav comes to power, and he's credited with what's called Mandal politics. And essentially, the short version is he is somebody who created a backward coalition of castes that had been disadvantaged and Muslims in order to win an election. Now, in some ways, the way that it's usually portrayed is not fair. The shorthand is often called Y plus M, Yadavs plus Muslims. In fact, if you walk around Bihar, you'll see that even today, even among people who no longer vote for Lalu, he has a huge amount of support among the most disadvantaged portions of society. Even upper castes who are extremely poor genuinely support Lalu because of what he did for the dignity of the most disadvantaged populations in Bihar. But that being said, his his era of leadership is also coincides with a contraction of the economy actually in Bihar. So economically it didn't do very well. And what has often been referred to as a jungle Raj, which essentially refers to a period in which it was no longer safe to go around Bihar. Violence seems to have picked up. As one of the people I spoke to, who was no longer supporting Lalu, but again admired him quite a bit, said, if a population has been exploited for over 100 years, of course there'll be violence if they come to power suddenly. So in some sense, there's a population that was quite angry and that sees what happened as some sort of a justification for exploitation that had taken place. And there's a large reservoir of this population in Bihar. Now, his governance model essentially was to exert control over local contacts, over the police, which sort of created this unsafe environment. But this essentially targeted funds and benefits towards a particularly target population who were his supporters. So this started falling apart, for various reasons. Going to jail, he had to put his wife into power, this and that. But his foe, Nitish Kumar, comes to power in 2005, and this is what Namita was referring to. And he comes to power as the head of the JDU alongside the BJP. And his finance minister is actually Sushil Modi, who is the state BJP leader, right? And he plays an important role in this election, as you'll see. So Nitish is an interesting guy. His caste base is not strong like Lalu, but he has a very different model of development. He's what I like to call, he has the Middle East model, right? Which is you give money to everyone, right? So Nitish massively expanded the state in Bihar. So 40% of GSDP is spent towards development and capital expenditures, which is a huge percentage. When we think about welfare states in Europe, we're in the 20% range. So this is, a massive scaling up of state expenditure. And this is the 40% number is just before this election. But one of the things that happens when you do this, for all of the lip service, ultimately people who are investing money and private companies that are investing money are looking at debt ratios. They're looking at ability to increase profits. And it is the case that Bihar, during his tenure, has been particularly poor on private investment and particularly poor on job growth. So that was one model of development that was being put forth, right? This sort of Nitish model, which is a very expansive state, increasing benefits, cycles for girls, something that many people have heard. So Narendra Modi, I probably don't need to say too much about, what his promises have been. I think most of us have some sense of that. But he essentially has the support base of a particularly aspirational group. He connects well to young voters. It's the simple line is minimal government, maximal governance, right? Job creation, private investment, almost everything that Nitish didn't stand for, right? That being said, as we were coming into this election, he was hurt by the price rise of pulses and some other things that hadn't seemed to go his way. But one thing I want to highlight as I sort of finish as I go through this discussion is that this is a larger debate that was taking place in the electorate. Nitish is an expansive state model. He is giving benefits. He's increasing pensions. He's offering 35% reservation to women. Modi, even if you look at the packages he's offering, they're infrastructure packages. They're not benefits packages. He is the guy who says, I'll give you jobs, I'll bring in money, I'll bring in private investment. Those are two very different models. And they do in various ways connect to voters. So that was, in my view, what was at stake in this election, and that is what a lot of the voters were deciding between. This is not unlike many development debates that are taking place across India. The second thing I want to talk about, and it's something that's going to figure prominently probably in the question and answer session, is what role does caste play in these kinds of elections? So one of the fundamental characters of Indian politics, especially post-1990, is electoral volatility. you have huge changes across states in who takes power. You have huge vote swings. But it is, of course, a completely democratic process. Now, that puts our traditional theories of caste, which were sort of built from the 50s and the 60s when there was one party controlling everything, into a lot of trouble. Because caste doesn't change, but electoral outcomes change a lot in India. And so caste is a constant, whereas elections are very variable. And if there's one fundamental character of Indian elections, is that they're very variable. And we saw this over this election. And so the way that I think about caste, and I think became very helpful to think about caste in this election, is that caste is an empirical regularity. It'll always be that upper castes vote for the BJP at a higher rate, the next group votes for BJP at slightly lower rates, or as you go on down, SC, ST, so on and so forth. This incidentally is a national phenomenon, right? If you look at 2009, that was true. If you look at 2014 national election, that's true. The only problem for the Congress is that there was a 10% shift towards the BJP in each group, right? And so what this tells me, and what's important for this election, is that while caste provides empirical regularities, every caste group has a floating vote. And often it's that floating vote that decides the election. So in our own sort of fieldwork, we met a huge number of Yadavs who are supposed to be Lalu's base, who had shifted to voting for Modi in 2014 and were shifting back, but not because of Lalu, but because of Nitish. They would sort of openly say, Lalu's our man, but he really didn't deliver when it came to development. And, we're young guys, we want jobs, we want benefits, we want this, that. And Nitish made the roads better. So we're going to vote for these guys, but it's because of Nitish, not for Lalu. And if you talk to a lot of journalists, they'll say they also had very similar experiences. This, unfortunately, I think in the media got conflated with Yadav consolidation. But this is just a general empirical problem. If you have two sides, you shouldn't view going one side or going the other side as pure caste consolidation. There are a number of reasons why one might be voting for one coalition or another. So, taking all of this sort of on board, I want to sort of quickly go through what the logic of the two alliances were, and then sort of a brief analysis of what I think happened during the campaign, from which sort of led to the huge slide from where the NDA was to where it ended up, which was in a very bad position at the end of the election. So the logic of the Grand Alliance was to take Lalu's fixed vote. So if you looked at data across elections, Lalu has a remarkably fixed vote. And it's because he has an emotional connection to voters. So there is this sort of, we will do anything for Lalu. And those are the only people who vote for him. Now his vote share has decreased over time. He's clearly not as strong as he used to be, but the people who vote for him, right? So he has a very fixed block of voters. And going into this election, we all had a pretty good guess of exactly what percentage of the vote he'd be able to command. Nitish is a tough one, right? He doesn't have a strong base. He has to bring in floating voters. And so the logic of the Grand Alliance was always fixed plus floating. And it was only going to win if Nitish brought in enough floating voters. The logic of the NDA, the BJP-led NDA, is that they were in a commanding position in 2014, 172 out of 243 seats. So they were going to have to hold on to as many of those voters as they can. Now again, clearly, if you're coming from outside Modi, from Gujarat, you don't have a fixed base in Bihar. Your voters are also floating voters. So we felt fairly early on that though the person who won the floating votes, because that's essentially what was going to drive the election, was the one who was going to win this election, and perhaps even in fairly large fashion. And the floating voters were essentially deciding upon these development models the development model I discussed. If you're a floating voter, if you're a voter and you were voting because you're a Yadav, you were already voting for Lalu. If you were voting because you're a Brahmin for Brahmin interests, then you were already voting for BJP. If I'm a floating voter and I may legitimately vote for either coalition, then it needs to be, then you have to sort of think about what are the sets of issues that drive that kind of voter. And it's the economy, right? And we've been seeing this for some time now in Indian politics. And whoever won that debate, in terms of who will do better for what I believe the economy should be doing, is the person who likely would have won this election. Now, the BJP and the NDA did something very bizarre, which is when there was a huge reservoir of floating voters, and that's where the election was, the BJP systematically went from playing its best card, which was Modi, jobs, Vikas, and started talking about beef, Pakistan, anything, everything, but Vikas. And it was very obvious on the ground. I think the English language media played this as communalism only came in right at the end of the election. But anybody who was there saw that the card had been played very early, and certainly the electorate saw that the card had been played very early. And it was very strange, actually, because it seemed like you had a pretty easy script to follow if you were the BJP and you didn't follow it. I think my calculation at that time, and this is a debatable calculation, is that the BJP would have won the election had they just stayed on script, had they just stayed on the economy. Given that you'd won 172 seats in 2014, it was going to take a massive slide in votes for you to lose the election. They just happened to have done so. Now, I think nothing, if I'm to just give a simple nugget about how this election, how the NDA played this election, all we need to do is think about Sushil Modi. So I told you already that he was the finance minister during Nitish's time. He can, and the BJP can legitimately claim some responsibility for what happened post 2005 in Bihar. Instead of playing that card, Lalu brings up beef as an issue on October 4th because of the Dadri incident here. The BJP decides we're going to counter Lalu with Sushil Modi in a very serious fashion over beef. So overnight, Sushil Modi, who has a lot of credibility as somebody who's a finance minister, may have some credibility on the economic side, is being used to talk about beef. And this is a guy, for those of you who sort of follow politics, Lalu might be one of the most charismatic politicians in India. Sushil Modi might be one of the least charismatic politicians in India, right? It's really a very bizarre strategy to take, right? And it also completely ruins your state BJP leader. So today, we'll see what the aftermath is, but let's sort of see what reputation Sushil Modi has after this electoral campaign, right? So, I think the BJP realized at some point that it was not doing a very good job, and Bahanu will talk more about this. But after the second phase of the elections, there was this weird gap. There was a 2-week gap between the second and third phase of the elections because of Durga Puja and this and that. They tried to they tried to change their campaign. It had some minimal effects, but basically by then it was too late, and they were never able to get everyone back on script. And so, this was sort of a complete failure. One just sort of very quick note, for people who might be wondering why this sort of Hindu consolidation message didn't work well in a place like Bihar, because we think of it as a place with sort of very, so feudal tendencies, conservative tendencies. So I've done most of my field research in Bengal, and if you go to Bihar, the social organization of society actually looks not so different from Bengal. And what that means is there's a significant amount of integration between Hindus and Muslims. So in most places, and inclusive even in Bengal, the villages are small in terms of neighborhoods. In Bihar, most of the villages I saw had 20 to 25 tolas, 20 or 25 neighborhoods of every jati and Muslims and Hindus. Now, neighborhoods are segregated by caste and by religion. But anytime you go to a bazaar, anytime you go to a chai ki dukan, it's highly integrated because every population is in the village. You also have other things, Biharis, like many sides of Eastern India, even the upper caste, a lot of them are fish eaters and meat eaters, so you don't have immediate restrictions over dietary rules. And so you were speaking a language, the BJP was speaking a language that really didn't fit with, I think, the realities that existed on the ground in terms of the way that Hindus and Muslims interact with each other. Despite there, of course, being Hindu-Muslim tensions and there being a conservative society. That's a sort of a larger sociological question. Now, I think I'm just going to sort of end this. As Namita mentioned, we wrote a series of pieces in the Hindu, and without talking about a lot of the other things that we mentioned, the day of the election, we were asked to write the election day lead, and quite simply, we call this one of the worst run state election campaigns in recent memory. And if I'm to put this election on something, if this electoral outcome, this slide of almost 120 seats. I don't think there can be any other explanation than one side, even if the other side does well, one side doing really, really poorly when running a campaign. So, thanks.
Thank you, Nilanjan. Next we have Banu.
Can you use this mic? Sure. Good afternoon. Before I begin, I would like to thank Namita for persuading us to do this, and would also like to thank Dr. Partho and Dr. Mehta, who during the course of the election kept on giving quite critical, very important comments as well, which shaped a lot of the understanding. And of course Nilanjan, because he sort of, let the project, let's do this, let's bring the data together, let's try and build some scholarship on what is actually going on there. So beyond that, so what I would be doing today is to just give a data story on the snapshot on what went wrong with the BJP. The first slide here is the 2014 election results, and like much of India, Bihar voted for the BJP. The figure 2 on your right shows the number of seats which the BJP and its allies won in 2014. Though it was a parliamentary election, we have broken down the PCs to the ACs, and as you can see that the BJP won 121, which simply is a majority by itself. So all that BJP had to do was to retain these 121 assembly constituencies for the 2015 elections, and they would have easily won this election. On the left side, on the left side, the figure 1 shows you the strike rate, which is the percentage of ACs, assembly constituencies, contested by a party in which the party was the top vote getter. And as you can see that BJP had a strike rate of 66.5, and its allies LJP and RLSP had a significant high. I mean, RLSP got 94.4% strike rate in the seats that it contested. So all in all, what we are trying to say here is that in 2014 the BJP was had won in a landslide manner, and for them to have done so badly in 2015 is worth exploring and to give some sort of explanation what went wrong. So this is the puzzle, right? So 114 seats were lost in 18 months. What went wrong, right? On the right side, figure 3 is the aggregate sort of picture of the seats that they have won in 2015. As you can see, BJP is 53, its allies RLSP, LGP and the HAM, which is in the end, they all won 5 seats. RJD won more than JDU, and Congress got better than what people had expected. But what's the important story is the table 1, which is what I think Nilanjan also alluded to, was this phase-wise reconfiguration of strategies of sort. So in the first phase and the second phase, which were both broadly separated by about a week or 10 days, we can see that the BJP strike rate, that's the last 2 columns, strike rate 2014 and strike rate 2015, we knew that the BJP was doing absolutely abysmal, 19% strike rate in 2015, where it got almost 80% strike rate in 2014. And then there is this long 2 or 3 week break, and then from what I could understand from the field notes as well as other articles which came out, there was a significant rethinking within the barracks in the NDA that there has to be some sort of reconfiguration in the electoral strategy. And we might debate about what that might be, whether it was beef or anything else, but there does seem to some increment in the BJP, in the NDA strike rate in the last 3 phases. From 19% they moved up to 27%. But again, they didn't do as well as the last time, which is 66%, right? So that's essentially what went wrong here. And the next 3 slides are broadly explanations for what might be an explanation for this sort of performance. So these are essentially your vote share per assembly constituencies for different political parties. On the left side is the NDA, on the right side is the Grand Alliance. The dotted line represents the average vote share per constituency in 2014, and the bold line, the bold line is 2014, and the dotted line is the average vote share per constituency 2015. Now let's look at the right side first. So essentially, the Mahagathbandhan had won about 46 to 47% of the vote share in 2014, which went down to about 41% in 2015. So what has been discussed in the popular narrative that it was a simple vote transfer of the Mahagathbandhan actually didn't happen. There is significant differences in these numbers. On the left side, as you can see that the BJP, the NDA had about 39% vote share per constituency in 2014, and they came down to about 34% vote share per constituency in 2015. And you can see that the BJP, the allies, from this figure it seems didn't do that bad, but we'll show it later that this was actually not the case. So essentially the broad picture from this slide is that there was significant reduction in vote shares per constituency for both alliances, but as we'll show later that it was way more for the BJP. Okay, so one of the things that we argued in about the fourth in this upcoming piece in the Hindu is this magic figure of 39%. Essentially what we are trying to say is that if and there's some sort of empirical proof that in 2010 the NDA got about 39% of the vote share and it won. In 2014 the NDA again got about 39.4% of the vote share and it won. And in 2015 Gathbandhan got about 41% vote share and it won. And that's why this sort of this 39% figure, where we've essentially said that if the BJP was or the NDA was able to retain 39% of the vote share, they would have easily won the Bihar election. And why do we say that? So essentially what we're trying to say is that the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan were the two broad alliances which people were voting for. So in 2014, both these alliances got about 86% of the vote share, and in 2015, both these alliances got about 75% of the vote share. So when the voter was shifting his votes, he was shifting between the two alliances. And if there was, and the second point here, that the NDA dropped from 39% in 2014 to 34% in 2015 means that the people who shifted from the NDA plus shifted to the Mahagathbandhan plus. And essentially the point is that if the BJP was able to retain the 4% which shifted, they would have possibly won this election. So that's essentially the broad picture, that there was a shift from one alliance to the other alliance, and the BJP, which Nilanjan gave a lot of explanations why that shift could have happened during the course of the election. Okay, this is the last slide, and it is quite interesting because we sort of got to understand this way later, almost after a week after the results were announced. On the left side is the strike rate of the BJP plus, that is the NDA plus its allies. And forget the figure and look at the vote share difference on the left side. And that table essentially shows you that in the seats in which the NDA contested and the BJP was there, how many vote shares did the opposition party get, versus in the seats in which the opposition in which one of the allies of the NDA was present, how much the vote share the opposition got. So in 2014, in the assembly constituencies in which BJP was contesting, and it's the second column, the first column, the BJP, 44% is what the opposition got versus 40% what the BJP got, and the difference between the two was almost 4.3%. But the seats in which the allies contested this time, there was a difference of 10%, which meant that BJP essentially fielded its allies in constituencies where they were bound to fail. And as you can see in the last NDA vote share 2015, the BJP got 37.2 and allies got 28% in these constituencies. So there was something insidious about BJP fielding its allies in constituencies where they were more or less bound to fail. So these are some of the insights which we have from the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhanu. I think that in Lamjan's presentation and Bhanu's wanted to sort of have it together because, we have the hard sort of data from the past elections and from an analysis of this and yet the fluidity of the entire election process. So what's coming out is not just the fact that, you have these numbers that you can sort of crunch out and you can sort of strategize, but also the fact that the election can turn on so little and so quickly as well. So in terms of like thinking about, you work on voting behavior, so maybe when we come to the question answer session, and you've said that voting behavior in India tends to be sort of determined at the very sort of last minute in between alliances. And so, is it fair to say, and we can talk more about this in the question answer, is it fair to say that the vote was not in this election for each individual party, but for the alliances? Would that be an assertion?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now I'll turn to Ghanshyam, and I think that not only would it be helpful for us to hear about whether you sort of agree with this analysis and how the internal thinking was within the JDU, but also reflect a little bit on the aftermath of the election as well. In some ways this election was remarkably different from others, and in some ways the aftermath of the election seems to be a sort of a resurgence or a back to the same kind of politics, because we have, of course, the resurgence of dynasty politics. We have Ranu Yadav's two sons being anointed as the deputy chief minister and the health minister of the new government. So what has changed in Bihar and what has not changed as well?
Right. Thank you, Namita. Thank you for putting this wonderful panel together. Thank you, Nilanjan, for setting it up with a good commentary, and thank you, Bhanu, for backing it up with good data. So my job is relatively easy. They have told everybody why BJP lost. I just wanted to lay out certain important plots of this election. The two things that we have not covered in this discussion so far. One is what was happening in the run-up to this election. What had happened in the run-up to this election? One, in the Rajya Sabha elections, right after the Lok Sabha elections were over, Nitish Kumar ji had openly asked for Lalu Prasad Yadav ji's support, along with not only support for his Rajya Sabha candidates, because BJP had played uncouth game or something that was non-parliamentary in some way to bring new candidates, take away JDU legislators, and in some way show that with their newfound power they could just run the state the way they want, disrespecting the majority that JDU had. So two events. One, anointment of Mr. Maji as the chief minister, where RJD went and supported JDU without JDU asking for open support. And two, when the Rajya Sabha elections happened, RJD was not certain whether it would want to support or not. So Nitish Kumar ji had to come out in the open through a press conference, seek support. So in the eyes of people, the trajectory of what was to come was opening up at this stage. Mr. Manji took over as the chief minister, and then at some point in time, for next 4 months, BJP, every top leader in BJP continued to comment or berate Mr. Manji as the chief minister, saying everything. I will give you 0 marks. There's a term called kharmas, that his coming is the kharmas of Bihar. So they said everything, and then eventually what happened was they brought Mr. Manji to their fold. Mr. Nitish Kumar became the chief minister again, but in the process further sought support from RJD. In one of his interviews, and then repeated in multiple interviews, he said sorry that I stepped down as chief minister and did not follow through on the verdict that was given to me in 2010. So that is something that happened. Alongside, in November, Mr. Nitish Kumar went around Bihar doing public meetings in every district, and playing the audio tapes of the Prime Minister, saying what are the promises he had made with respect to black money, what are the promises he had made with respect to minimum support price for farmers. So basically saying that, look, I stand by my decision to move away from Mr. Narendra Modi, and look, BJP has not followed through in their promises. And somewhere in the middle, Mr. Amit Shah, BJP president, in commenting on one of the promises said, "Wo to jumla tha." Now the word jumla caught on. It just came as a slap in people's face, because at a time when people were really hopeful that something would happen, the national president in a sense of arrogance just telling everybody that that was a jumla, and nobody from BJP came through, defended that statement. So this is what was happening, and then that is when Bihar elections came up. By the time Nitish Kumar was already the chief minister, people were beginning to believe his version of the story more than BJP's version of the story. BJP continued to say that how Nitish Kumar ji was wrong in breaking the alliance, but people had moved on. BJP did not move on. People thought that they had already taken a decision on Nitish Kumar's decision to break from the alliance and voted in 2014. Now it was BJP's job to do its work. So just before the election, the Prime Minister announced a package for Bihar, and he announced that package in a non-Prime Minister fashion, almost as if he was asking for it, almost as if it was an auction. So this was also not taken up well, and by this time, two of the most vocal people, which everybody could relate to, which was Nitish Kumar and Lalu Prasad Yadav, were already on the ground talking to people or explaining everything that the BJP was doing. So people were already beginning to connect more, because on the side of BJP, there was nobody who was appointed as chief minister. So the only voice that carried to the people was Mr. Narendra Modi. He could not be available to comment on every issue. So there were far more certain and fact-driven commentaries coming out of JDU and RJD reaching to people than from BJP. So that is what was happening prior to election. The second thing that we have not discussed is what are the problems that Bihar has faced, and why it is important that the way the campaign unraveled, these problems, people actually have to see who is going to solve some of these problems, not all of them, but at least some of these problems. So I'll come to it as I put out this just 6 slides, and what we are going to discuss is the 5 things in this election that I thought was very important. One was leadership. How did the NDA present their leadership? How did Mahagathbandhan present the leadership? 2 is agenda. What is the agenda that NDA put out for people? What is the agenda that Mahagathbandhan put out for people? 3 is social base. What was the social base that NDA was trying to appeal to, and what was the social base that Mahagathbandhan was trying to appeal to? 4th was campaign. How did the overall campaign unravel? We have looked at some of the data, so I hope that this broad discussion will allow us to put it in some perspective. And finally, candidates. And it's a very simple formatted presentation. So when we look at leadership, right, you have NDA and MGs for Mahagathbandhan. For NDA, the leadership was Prime Minister and Amit Shah. Prime Minister, somebody that whose story it has been so widely circulated that everybody knows. Amit Shah is somebody whose story is not known to people, and it is important. You saw some of the visuals of Bihar. It's a very rural place. 90% of Bihar lives in villages. Every morning and evening there is a serious discourse about everything happening around them. So they want to know their bureaucrats, they want to know their politicians. It's one of the states where movie stars would be discussed less often than the politicians or bureaucrats. So when you thrust somebody like Amit Shah as top leader, he is making the headlines, and people do not know about him. It is you cannot expect that his commentary would make to public discourse, because on the other side you have somebody like Lalu Prasad Yadav ji or Nitish Kumar ji, who people know about. They talk about them every day. So that was one of the things that happened. Prime Minister was available from time to time, but that availability was Maharali driven. And if you look at the statements that came out from the Prime Minister, that again was something that disappointed people. The DNA remark, the package, or asking in rally after rally that Bijli aayi, and when he would ask Bijli aayi, there were people who from ground who would respond Bijli aayi. But somebody, probably it happens in politics that once you rise or you become a giant in politics, your ears are too up there to be able to listen to the ground. Right? Nobody told him that you should not ask this question. It's a very simple thing to tell that, look, your own numbers from I think it's Energy Authority, is saying that 36,000 villages in Bihar have been electrified. Any number you take, it shows that Bijli Aayi. Right? Nitish Kumar was saying, look, in 2012, on August 15, I promised that if I do not improve the electricity situation in Bihar, I will not come and seek your votes. BJP was trying to take that statement and change it to speak to people, saying that Nitish Kumar ji had said that if I don't bring 24/7 electricity to every village, I will not seek for votes. And it was Prime Minister quoting that statement. So once again, Prime Minister was, you look at important junctures in this campaign, either the Prime Minister was going in the wrong direction with wrong commentary or just plain wrong data. So that was one of the things. Look, the next level of leadership for BJP was their national leaders. Again, people did not know about these national leaders. People like Smriti Irani or Hema Malini, they are people, some people would know about, but they do not set the discourse on the ground. RSS was obviously active, but we'll discuss later how the RSS commentary on reservation and the way it was picked up by Lalu Prasad Yadav ji and Nitish Kumar ji changed the way people perceived RSS, especially the core vote banks. So their activity was diminished because of that. And most importantly, we spoke about Sushil Kumar Modi. Now, it's important to look at Sushil Kumar Modi from two instances. One, when right after the Lok Sabha election, this artificial issue of love jihad was picking up. Sushil Modi gave an interview in Indian Express saying that this is not relevant to Bihar. So in some way, he is a leader of modern outlook in Bihar from BJP and had done well as a finance minister. And then you compare 2015 elections, and he said this election was between beef eaters and people who do not eat beef. So you see the natural stance of a leader getting changed because there was a certain level of desperation and there was no other plot. So BJP had relegated the leaders who had very vociferously went after the leadership in Bihar. Both Lalu Prasad Yadav ji and Nitish Kumar ji, Nand Kishore Yadav, Sushil Modi ji were very active in criticizing these two leaders. But their word was not there in the campaign. It was Amit Shah, every picture was Amit Shah or Prime Minister. So allies, who were the allies? Jitan Ram Manjhi was their newfound ally. Now people don't forget that for 4 months you have panned him and then you have snatched away from somebody who made him the chief minister. This is just plain wrong and you cannot nuance this argument. But BJP continued to do that because they kept looking from a Delhi view rather than a Patna view of situation. So as a result, this was how the leadership played out. For Mahagathbandhan, the leadership was clearly and thoroughly with Nitish Kumar and Lalu Prasad Yadav. To that extent, I can go on record and say that even Congress realized it and let it remain that way. The number of rallies that top Congress leaders did speaks for this fact. There were other leaders who came, Congress leaders came, their state leaders, but the fact that you were not seeing a lot of helicopters carrying leaders from outside, going to public meetings where people could not connect, gave space to local candidates to do their work, because they knew that after Lalu Prasad Yadav and Nitish Kumar, the next guy people can immediately relate to is a candidate who's out there campaigning, and the candidate did not have to bother about quoting 5-10 leaders from Delhi who would come in and do small election rallies. So in some way, the role of candidate in terms of the leadership was more pronounced in case of Mahagathbandhan than BJP, than NDA. I'm not concluding it in any direction. I'm just laying it out for you so that you can draw the conclusions. So next week, when we go to agenda, what is the agenda that NDA set out? The first agenda that NDA in rally after rally said Jungle Raj. Now people know that when Mr. Lalu Prasad Yadav was in jail, the Prime Minister had in a public meeting said that मैं यदुवंशियों का ख्याल रखूंगा, यदुवंशी द्वारका से हैं, and he had tried to create that emotional connect. Right, so from that moment to this moment, when Lalu Prasad Yadav ji was at the forefront of one of the campaigns, talking about Jungle Raj, all it meant was that it consolidated the core vote base of Lalu Prasad Yadav. and the point Jungle Raj would have stuck if there was a counter agenda of progress, which was not there. Look at the other things that BJP raised: beef, minority reservation. This was what dominated the discourse. When it came to development, there are two things that they talked about, three things in fact: package, electricity, and Nitish Kumar's failures. Now, in 10 years of being Chief Minister of Bihar, the anti-incumbency against Nitish Kumar is very little, and it's very issue specific. It's not a personality specific anti-incumbency that he's done wrong thing or he's arrogant. All those things have been washed away. So when BJP spoke about packages or package they had provided, one, the way it was presented was bad. Two, the authenticity of package had not connected. People on the ground do not understand what does 1 lakh crore mean for them. They want specific things. Vote is their only transaction that can allow them to acquire specific things in the next 5 years from the government. So BJP could not connect on the package. Electricity was a false agenda being presented, and Nitish Kumar's failures was something that a simple survey could have told him that which side they should lean on. They could have easily leaned on saying that okay, Nitish Kumar has achieved this, but Bihar has a young population. Bihar has, as per economic survey, 4 crore 17 lakh people under age of 14, which is 1 in 9 children in India is in Bihar. To give you a perspective, 1 in 50 primary schools is in Bihar, 1 in 100 secondary schools is in Bihar. Between 15 and 35, we have around 3 crore 22 lakh people. So it's a very young state. So you could have spoken about aspirations, but you did not. Mahagathbandhan was very clear in its presentation of what is going to be the agenda of Mahagathbandhan. One, Nitish Kumar's track record, it was clearly presented, and Lalu Prasad Yadav ji, which was something that most people might not have expected, was very, very clear that Nitish Kumar is going to be the Chief Minister, as well as did not contend his track record at any point. Even when a lot of people were panning Lalu Prasad Yadav's term as Chief Minister, he still spoke highly of Nitish Kumar's regime as Chief Minister. So that was one. The promises that was set out was very clearly focused on the non-caste specific voters that we wanted to reach out to. The first promise was to the youth. Now BJP always claims that their stronghold is youth, but the first promise that Nitish Kumar, in his 7 promises that were throughout highlighted and was the primary part of the common program that was laid out, the first promise was giving low interest credit to youth for pursuing college education, giving them allowance to pursue employment opportunities. The second promise was to women, giving them 35% reservation in jobs. Both youth was a new chapter. As far as women was concerned, it was a continuation of Nitish Kumar's policies. The third was about electricity, that we have improved electricity. The next is we would ensure that electricity reaches every household. The fourth was about ensuring that there would be roads and nalis and everything reaching every household. The fifth was about toilets. The sixth was about opening avenues in Bihar. So if you look at this, I would have gotten the order wrong, but broadly these were very, very technical, easy to understand promises that anybody could repeat, and it was made authentic because there was a budgetary allowance presented that if I become the Chief Minister, next 5 years I'd allocate this amount of money to this activity. It didn't mention, one can argue that it didn't mention how those resources would come from, but during the elections you don't get into such nuanced arguments. Just lay out what my agenda is. So with respect to the track record promises, reservation, RSS reservation. So on the forefront were these promises, but also when the RSS commentary came on reservation, what was happening on the BJP side? For the first 3 instances of this stance by the RSS chief, he reiterated his stance. Within a week, you saw top ministers from national government sitting in RSS headquarters, speaking highly about how they were proud to be pracharaks, and they had no clue what it was doing on the ground, because the state leaders probably were not communicating because they were not in command, and top leaders were too busy doing many things. In the middle, Amit Shah ji was in Karnataka. He was traveling to many places. Till one day it dawned upon him that the election is slipping away, and his response, rather than initiating a stronger presence for the state leadership, his response was he placed himself in Patna, which was just in the opposite direction. Then he became the central anchor to all the discourse that was happening. So, in terms of agenda, the third was BJP's failures, which Nitish Kumar ji had already gone around Bihar, so it was easy to speak about them. The black money, the farmers issue, and the fact was there was a 300 districts in the country are facing drought. So at this time, those failures, the Dal issue only went on to say that those failures are real and this government is not doing anything about it. And when these failures were spoken, what was BJP's response? The Prime Minister's response was, look, you've given me 60 months, speak about my performance after 60 months. Do not ask questions about my 18 months performance. This is what he said in rallies. And Namita mentioned about what happens after these elections. The day the verdict came, on the same night, a top Twitter trend was about Lalu Prasad Yadavji's son becoming the Deputy Chief Minister, and people were asking questions. So you cannot ask people in this country to not ask you questions. People want instant answers, and that is something that BJP did not respond to its failures. If you look at social base, it was talked about. The NDA social base, they were quite clear. Upper caste were the social base. It showed up in their candidate selection. One thing that is important that happened in this election was the Mahagathbandhan represented their candidates very, very synergetically with their social base, in terms of number of people who were given ticket from Muslim community or from OBCs, EBCs and so on. NDA wanted to prop up EBC vote share, but did not communicate it in terms of the way they allocated seats to candidates. They disproportionately gave seats to upper caste candidates because there is upper caste bias. So upper caste and Paswans were their core candidates. EBC and Mahadalits, these were two constituencies which both Mahagathbandhan and NDA went after. The OBC community, which is largely Yadav, Koiris and Gurmis. So that was almost airtight. There were small groups here and there that went and voted in their own way, or they became the floating. But if you go to any village in Bihar, you could see these three communities speaking in one voice. It also meant that somebody like Upendra Kushwaha ji, whose party represents Kushwaha vote base nearly 4-5%, was one of the vote banks that became floating, that went from more NDA aligned to more Mahagathbandhan aligned. In terms of the non-caste specific vote banks, if you see, it represents in the data as well. The NDA went after urban voters as well as youth. They kept saying that we would do something for youth, but they didn't have anything specific to showcase. Urban voters, obviously, for the backdrop of Jungle Raj and other things, for their aspirations, connect well with BJP, and that happened. As far as Mahagathbandhan is concerned, they addressed the youth issue, and they realized that the promises that they were making was actually reaching out to youth. The video that I showed earlier was from a 120 village tour that I did prior to election, and alongside this cultural event, I also interacted with youth, small chopals of youth, asking about skill development, asking a very simple question: why is the Prime Minister and Chief Minister today in electoral rallies talking about skill development? And the youth did not know. My message to the Chief Minister after this 120 villages meeting was that there is no wave among youth. It's neither for you nor for BJP. So if we intervene and we say something which is believable, and one thing about Nitish Kumar which is widely believed is he follows through whatever promises he makes. So he clearly, it's a contrast with respect to the Prime Minister, at least in the eyes of people from Bihar. So that promise was important. Looking at the campaign, what the NDA campaign was built around PM's work, Bihars Need, and a dynamic agenda. What is the need of Bihar? That was very poorly articulated, and it was articulated by somebody like Amit Shah or the Prime Minister in big rallies where something else became the catch point of the rally. What is the point of saying that this is the kind of development that I want to do, when you abut it or when you butt it with something else which would become a headline that these people want to snatch away reservation and give it to the minorities. So one thing that happened was also this: the fact that agenda kept changing. From day one, they started with a little bit of development. By the end of the election, by the fifth phase, they were giving advertisements of cow and appealing for votes. So the fact that agenda kept changing also ensured that people did not stick as much to the program that BJP was laying out. They also spoke out in a big way in their campaign on Mahagathbandhan's failures as well as Jungle Raj. The Jungle Raj thing, because BJP did not lay out a credible alternative, Jungle Raj bar only went on to consolidate the Mahagathbandhan's votes. In terms of overall campaign that NDA had, it was an industrial scale campaign. If it had succeeded, it would have set a new this new mechanism in which campaigns in India, especially against regional parties, could be run. They had more than 2,000 buses signed up. There were more than 12,500. This is an Indian Express story. 12,500 public meetings had been recorded on video that BJP had conducted. They had more than 27,000 autos that were putting out their ads. 64,000 graffiti all across Bihar on walls saying "Ab ki baar Bhajpa Sarkar," and this was all done neatly through apps, GPRS tagged. So it was an industrial scale campaign. Money was not an issue. The rallies were big. There were advertisements in the newspapers, in television, on radio. So there was no, but its direction was negative. If you look at the overall media narrative of what was coming out in discussions, throughout BJP was negative. It was leaning too much on what Lalu Prasad Yadav said with respect to beef, or what was Jungle Raj about, or how Nitish Kumar broke the alliance on wrong grounds. They did not bias their campaign towards positivity. On the other side, our campaign was very consistent. Throughout, we spoke about Nitish Kumar's leadership. BJP's failure, be it Dal, Dalit, the statement made by a senior minister, or be it Dadri, or be it with respect to jobs, the failures were very clear for people to understand, because the media narrative around those failures were closer to our version of it. The final point was that in terms of we could not respond in an industrial scale campaign, but our campaign was one Bihari. The whole Bihari versus Bahari issue became important as a result. Nitish Kumar himself did nearly 250 rallies. Lalu Prasad Yadav, I think, did 262 rallies across the state, and they did not do any rally together. So they were out there between, I think the Prime Minister did nearly 30 rallies and Amit Shah ji did another 30-40 rallies, right? And then the rest 200 rallies of BJP were by people who were not so connected with Bihar as somebody like Nitish Kumar would be, or somebody like Lalu Prasad Yadav would be. So in terms of our own campaign machinery, we knew our limitations. We did not put out any advertisement in the television. There were hardly any advertisements in the newspapers. So it was all about going there and connecting to the people on very simple things. So final slide was on candidates. See, we had a problem of plenty because JDU had contested on 143 seats. BJP had contested on 101 seats. So they had to bring a lot of new candidates. For us, we had an RJD which used to contest on more than 180 seats. So between us, we had to pack ourselves up in a way that we contest on 101 seats, RJD contested on another 101 seats, and the rest of the seats, 41 seats, went to Congress. So the candidates put out by Mahagathbandhan were generally candidates that people knew. Many of them were ex-ministers. So there was a engagement between people and the candidate on the common party framework, that okay, this guy represents this party, and the caste synergy was there. Whereas the NDA, a lot of candidates who were party hoppers were given tickets. We spoke about allies. There was clearly a negative synergy in the way the allies worked. There was the Hindustan Awam Morcha of Mr. Manjhi was seeing itself as a big Dalit party, was standing in as an opposing force to Ram Vilas Paswan's party LJP. So the contradiction between allies also played down the candidate that was pitched by the NDA. So this is what, as far I think, this is what happened on these 5 aspects: leadership, agenda, social base, campaign, and candidates. I want to conclude by saying 2 things about the video that we saw. One thing you would notice in that video is that there is a very strong and assertive women participation. In the initial part, women also speak about how they perceive the young women and especially the urban women. So you can see a perceptible urban-rural divide even over there. Two, the last 1 minute of that video was about a Muslim guy singing. Now these are all public events. A number of these events happened on temples. So you could imagine that there's a guy who's Muslim who's singing a religious song at a temple, and they were publicly visible to everybody. So this is the fabric of Bihar. When you go to village, it's very culturally very deep. It is the way it is. Somebody mentioned there are a number of tolas, but basically the way village is organized is because there is no industry. People have to use the labor that they have to run the economy of the village. Often it is the work that they do is classified along the caste lines. So there are certain set works that Muslims have to do, and that integrates them with the rest of the community. There are certain set works that other castes have to do, and you would find cases where the upper caste, a lot of upper castes who don't plow their own field, they have given on contract or on sharecropping their land to Muslims. It happens in my own village as well. So it's a very integrated society in that manner. It's difficult to, if you have to polarize, you have to polarize village after village. You cannot polarize in an urban setting. It is quite possible that one section of city is all Hindus, other section of city could be all Muslims. But over here it is not represented in that manner. So polarization in an assembly election can be very difficult. In a Lok Sabha election, it is quite possible because you have each constituency is very large. So any propaganda can sail through. But in an assembly election where there are much more filters, the candidate is a filter. There are far more number of people on the ground talking about the campaign. So that agenda was bound to fail. And finally, the one thing that we did not cover was what are the problems of Bihar. The problems of Bihar, as I listed out, the problems are that these 90% of the state which lives in villages, we have a number of villages which are 10,000 people and above, but yet they are unstructured settlements. So eventually they would need urban architecture, but that is missing. There is no labor market. The agriculture, people are dependent on agriculture. Electricity has just come in. There are no jobs. The school infrastructure has failed, and the public health infrastructure is just coming up. So when you lay out these problems, you have to find political parties who respond to it. Different parties respond to it in different way. We chose one way that let us find more avenues for direct transfer to people so that they can go and find solutions for themselves while we don't have institutional solutions. But BJP didn't offer anything. So that is in my opinion was one reason why people were very clear about their electoral choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghanshyam, for a very comprehensive presentation of the reasons why the BJP lost and the reasons why the JDU won.